The Galactic Council had made their decision with the arrogance of those who had never truly faced humanity. When the Zrathian collective issued their ultimatum, demanding Earth's surrender and the conscription of human soldiers into their empire, the alien diplomats expected negotiations, pleas, perhaps even immediate submission. What they didn't expect was silence, followed by a single transmitted message: "We're sending our representatives." Annie stood at attention in the orbital staging area, her combat armor gleaming under the harsh artificial lights. She wasn't a general. She wasn't even an officer in the traditional sense. She was a hunter-killer, part of Earth's most lethal response unit, and she had been trained for one purpose: absolute victory through overwhelming violence. Beside her, Massey checked his weapon systems with mechanical precision, his eyes cold and calculating, swept across the deployment bay where 200 other soldiers waited in perfect silence. They weren't an army in the conventional sense. They were predators, each one hand-selected from Earth's most dangerous special operations units, enhanced with bleeding-edge technology, and stripped of every hesitation that might make them question their mission. "Command says the Zrathians have never lost a war," Annie said quietly, her voice barely audible over her helmet's internal comm. Massey's lips curved into something that might have been a smile if it had contained any warmth. "Command also says they've never fought humans." The truth was simple and terrifying. Earth hadn't sent diplomats because diplomacy had failed. They hadn't sent conventional forces because conventional warfare was obsolete against an enemy with superior numbers and technology. Instead, they had sent something the galaxy had never encountered before: humans who had evolved warfare into an art form so brutal, so efficient, that mercy had become a tactical liability they couldn't afford. The dropships launched without ceremony, cutting through the void toward the Zrathian flagship. Annie felt her heartbeat slow, entering the meditative state that combat required. Around her, the other soldiers sat in perfect stillness, but she could feel the coiled violence radiating from each one. They were weapons forged in Earth's countless conflicts, sharpened by centuries of humans killing humans with ever-increasing efficiency. When the Zrathians had studied human history, they had seen the wars, the treaties, the peacekeeping forces. What they had failed to understand was that humans had spent 10,000 years perfecting the art of murder. Every technological advancement, every strategic innovation, every cultural evolution had been tested in blood. Humanity hadn't just survived, they had thrived by becoming the deadliest species ever to crawl from a planet's surface. The boarding action lasted 17 minutes. Annie moved through the Zrathian corridors like death incarnate, her weapon an extension of her will. The aliens had expected soldiers who followed rules of engagement, who hesitated before firing, who valued their own lives enough to seek cover and retreat. Instead, they found killers who advanced through withering fire without flinching, who calculated angles of attack with the cold precision of artillery computers, who treated their own survival as secondary to mission completion. Massey breached the command center with brutal efficiency, his team flowing through the reinforced doorway like water finding cracks in a dam. The Zrathian commanders, beings who had orchestrated the conquest of 17 civilizations, found themselves facing humans who fought with a ferocity that defied their understanding of warfare. These weren't soldiers protecting territory or defending honor. These were hunters who had come to kill, and every movement, every shot, every tactical decision was optimized for maximum lethality. The Zrathian admiral, a being whose strategic brilliance had never known defeat, stared at the humans with something approaching terror. "You fight without honor," he gasped, his translator struggling with the concept. "You are not warriors, you are murderers." Annie removed her helmet, letting him see her face. Her expression held no anger, no hatred, only the calm certainty of a predator who had already won. "You're right," she said simply. "We're not warriors. Warriors fight for glory, for honor, for noble causes. We fight to win, and we'll do whatever it takes to ensure our species survives. You wanted Earth soldiers? This is what we are." Massey stepped forward, his weapon still trained on the command crew. "Your empire has rules of war. You have codes of conduct. You wage warfare like it's a sport with boundaries and limitations." His voice carried the weight of humanity's bloody history. We don't We learned a long time ago that the only rule that matters is survival. And we've spent 10,000 years becoming very, very good at it. The Galactic Council's emergency session convened within hours of the boarding action's conclusion. The Zrathian flagship had been captured with minimal human casualties and devastating enemy losses. More terrifying than the military victory was the realization of what humanity represented. A species that had weaponized every aspect of their existence, that had turned violence into science, that approached warfare with the same innovative thinking they applied to art and philosophy. As Annie and Massey returned to Earth, decorated not as heroes but as successful assets, the galaxy faced an uncomfortable truth. They had assumed humanity would conform to their understanding of civilized warfare. They had been catastrophically wrong. Earth hadn't sent generals to negotiate terms or officers to demonstrate military capability. They had sent killers in army suits, and the message was unmistakable. Humanity would not be conquered, would not be enslaved, would not be intimidated. They would fight with a totality of purpose that made conventional warfare look like children playing at war. The Zrathian collective withdrew their ultimatum within a week. The galaxy had learned its lesson. Written in blood and terror, humans weren't warriors seeking glory. They were survivors who had made an art of killing, and they wore their army suits like wolves wore sheep's clothing, a polite fiction that barely concealed the predators beneath.